Sikkim 365 and Baylor Plus have teamed up to bring Baylor fans the ultimate content bundle. You can sign up now for $17.99 a month, a $5 monthly savings, and get instant access to all premium content on both websites. For more information, visit either sikkim365.com or baylorplus.com today. What's up, Baylor family? Welcome to Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. It's Monday, October 28th, and Grace and I are excited to join you following another Baylor victory, this time on homecoming. First home Big 12 win since the 2022 season against Kansas. The Bears beat the Oklahoma State Cowboys 38-28. Baylor's rushing offense and rushing defense led the way in this game. Baylor's now 4-4 on the season, 4 games to go. And Grayson, like last week we mentioned, and we kind of both agreed that Baylor needed to do whatever it could to slow down the Oklahoma State running game, because if they didn't, then it presents more problems in the secondary. And that's exactly what Baylor did. I know they sacrificed some in what they decided to do. They made some really self-inflicted wounds in that game. But overall, man, like I think that they had a game plan. They followed that game plan, and it got them a victory. There's still a lot of things to work on for next week against TCU. But overall, I think this team did what they needed to do in this game, even though it kind of got a little uneasy late after kind of having control of the game.
Right. And I mean, there's no doubt about it. Baylor won this game because they stopped the run. I mean, that's pretty plain and simple. And eventually Alan Bowman wasn't going to be able to continue to complete passes at the rate that he was going. And also, I think, Brennan Presley was just, Baylor's going to have to fix that. Because that was, he kept just beating man coverage. He was beating zone coverage. Matt Jones was getting caught lined up on him at times. Carl Williams couldn't guard. I mean, it was just like whoever wanted to guard him, go for it. And they couldn't. And that was tough, right? Because it's like, wow, this game plan is working. But then you got this guy who's just beating your game plan. And so you come up with all these stops, you come up with all these plays, and then you kind of end that first half and you're just like, man, Oklahoma State's throwing it all over the field, and you look into it even more. It's just basically Brennan Presley's just making plays. And so I think there were some things that they definitely need to clean up, some plays specifically. I think it was more plays, not necessarily the entire game plan. It's just a play here, a play there where you're giving up an explosive play, or you're not taking advantage of something, or, we'll get to another fake punt that a team has converted on Baylor, which that has to be fixed. But yeah, I think in general, this was a huge win for Baylor. And I think that's the biggest takeaway for me is we can talk about the game plan. We can talk about all those things, but at the root of all this is winning a game in front of your home fans on homecoming, a decent crowd. It wasn't an elite crowd, but it was decent. And I felt like Baylor really responded, and they were up for the test and got a huge win.
Yeah, it was. We've talked about that. I mean, the home wins have been so few and far between against power competition, Big 12 competition specifically. It's been since 2022 since they had a win in that type of setting, and so many letdowns in those moments over those few years. I mean, you think about the Kansas State game in 2022. You think about the TCU game in 2022, and that's where it kind of all started. And then it went through all of last year. You get 2 Big 12 wins, both of them on the road. So coming back and getting this one at home after the road win over Texas Tech, it kind of justified the Texas Tech game a little bit more. Everything that we saw in this game built on what they did against Texas Tech. I think you can go back to the game plan and just say, if Baylor really had wanted to say, hey, Allen, you're not going to just, pick us apart down the field, they could have changed their game plan a little bit. I think you say, hey, you're not going to have explosive plays. You're going to have to drive the ball consistently. Now, Baylor, the pass on the sideline to Brennan Presley where it's a tackle for loss for 5 yards, and it's a broken tackle, and then he tight ropes the sideline. Like that's the type of play that cannot happen for a good team. And that's where they're still feeling their way in those particular settings. Like that's a loss of 4 or 5 yards. That's been a 40-yard touchdown. That makes the game close when it was potentially going to kick a field goal there. Like there's so many components that change the outlook on one single play. You mentioned the fake punt. I think that was around the same time, but there's just so many little things that now it's like, okay, we've done all of this. We've played 2 complete games. We've done this and this, but there's now smaller details. There's the plays, the consecutive plays that we have to live. We have to get the 4-down stop, right? We have to do all of these things to get these to really play a complete game. They're going to need that to end the season, starting with TCU. But I'm with you. Like, there are so many things about this game, but the end of it was they won the game. They showed the things that they've shown all season in that they're starting to run the football again. Sawyer Robertson's going to be very good. The linebacker groups for Baylor, when they're set on stopping the run, they're going to do that with the defensive line. And we'll talk about all these guys individually in these performances, but they got the win. Like that is the ultimate goal now. You don't have to be pretty anymore. You're trying to get 6+ wins to extend your season into the bowl season. And that's what they did. They got the 4th win. Now they got 4 more to get 2 or more wins for the rest of the season.
Right. And they're back to 4-4, back to 500. I mean,
Yeah.
And just to be clear, we got to remember this team was projected at 5.5 wins by Vegas. That was the projected outcome. And Baylor's right in line to potentially surpass that and maybe surpass it by a game or 2. We'll see. We'll see how the season plays out. They're going to have to take advantage of some things, and they're going to have to beat some teams that are pretty equal. You know what I mean? I mean, I look around the Big 12 and I'm like, Baylor wins huge in Lubbock. Tech turns around and probably should have beaten TCU. If their quarterback doesn't get hurt, they probably win that game. And then if the freshman doesn't fumble the football, they probably win that game. And so this conference, it's wild. TCU could show up next week and put together their best performance of the season. And then you're just sitting there going, oh man. But I think in general, Baylor's put themselves in a great spot here. I tweeted after the game because I felt like it was kind of appropriate after this little bit of a winning streak. But I basically just said that, this team's giving 2012 vibes a little bit.
Yeah.
And that 2012 team, they went through their struggles, man. They lost on the road against Iowa State. They were down bad. They were 3-5 on the season. And from there, they didn't lose again. And they turned it around and really turned the season around and then built momentum for obviously what was to come in 2013, 2014. So I'm not saying it's exactly equivalent, but I do think that there is something about a team turning the corner and utilizing a favorable schedule to do so.
Yeah, I wrote about it last week, and I always like to take these 20,000 feet looks, but Baylor was 3-4 this time last year before the 8th game. And then you go into a homecoming game against Iowa State and you think, hey, we have the chance to win this, move to 4-4, move on to the season. They lose it. They lay an egg at home, don't win it. This year they had the chance. They had kind of like the mulligan, right? They had that chance to come back and win a big home game, and they did it. So you could have reverted to 2023 and say, oh, they lost this game. Now it's going to be finished just the same way. But now it's more like the 2012 season, like you mentioned, even the 2018 season in some ways, that they struggled early in the season, some changes, and then they got on track late, end up going to a bowl game. So we'll see what happens, as I got little bugs flying around me. But yeah, so let's start with the offense. Let's start. I mean, game plan was obvious. Sawyer Robertson only threw the ball 19 times in this game, and it's because they could run the football. And that was, I mean, dude, it was awesome to see. Starting with Dawson Pendergrass, but we'll talk through this whole game offensively. I had sent a text before this game, and I said, if they rush for 300+ yards in this game, they will surpass their rushing total from 2023 in 8 games. I didn't think there's any way they're getting 300 yards in this game, and they got 350 yards, and they have more rushing yards now in this season than they did all of last season.
Right. And I mean, I'm just, we looked at this coming into the matchup, and we went through, and it was like, oh, this team ran for 300 yards. This team ran for 389 yards. This team ran for 255 yards. Like, there was this sample size of Oklahoma State getting ran over. I mean, it has happened all year long, and it happened again. And once again, this was a situation, and it became very evident, right? Because when Bryson Washington was getting carries, I think Bryson's a really good running back. I think he is their best overall running back. But in this game, you had to exploit the linebackers, and exploiting the linebackers meant you needed more patience out of your running backs. And Bryson was fine. He ends up 17 carries for 78 yards. But if you look at his runs, it's a lot of getting the handoff, getting what's there, just kind of running fast, trying to get through the hole, moving the pile. That's great. But what Dawson and even Richard Reese, I mean, Richard Reese was 6 for 52. And he only, I think, had like 7 snaps. So he really took advantage of his snaps in this game. And then Dawson Pendergrass, 6 for 142. But what they did was they set up their blocks. And the moment they saw a hole, exploded through the hole. They took what was given to them, but they were patient. And they needed that in this game. That was a massive key, I think, for Baylor. Really turned the game around once they started putting in Pendergrass and Richard Reese, where it was like, oh, their patient running style is really helping this Baylor offensive line exploit these linebackers who we talked about just aren't very good for Oklahoma State right now.
Yeah, the Baylor's offensive line got movement, but it was like you just can't run into the movement, right? And that's what Bryson did early. And so it was like 3 yards a carry, 4 yards a carry, 3 yards a carry. And the offense wasn't stagnant by any means, but it wasn't what the game plan needed to be in that moment. With Dawson, man, we've seen this from him. We saw it some last year on occasion, but this game particular, and like you can see his game is not breaking 50-yard runs. Like he's gassed it. The 2 runs that he had that kind of jump started Baylor. He kind of flourished. He like flurried at the end. He just kind of juiced out. But his line is nuts. So the first carry of the game, -3 yards. Okay, so that he had 6 on the game. That one was -3. The next carry, 34. 39. He had a 30, and it's kind of like you forget about it, but he had a 34-yard touchdown that was called back for a penalty. So he had 48, 39, 34, then a 3-yarder, and then a 55 to end it. So if you add that 34 that came back for a penalty, he's like, what is he at? Almost 200 yards, 180 yards, and that was above his average. So that 23.7 average would have gone up. I mean, it was just an incredible day for him.
Yeah. Did they score on that drive? Did he have another big run after the toss? The toss that got called back. I can't remember, but I will say we're not going to remember the toss. Like I know people aren't going to really look at that because it didn't count, but his cutback on that toss, when he got into the open field, was awesome. I mean,
I think they scored, but I don't think he scored.
Okay,
I don't think he scored on that play. I'm going to look through it real quick.
He had the one run that was later in the game where I think this was maybe the 30-yard run where he got into the open field and he was around like the 15 or the 20-yard line, and you could tell. Just gassed. I mean, just completely. He started running sideways. He's just trying to get down. That was awesome, but he got revenge. Yeah, he got revenge a little bit later with that touchdown run that he was able to finish. But and the one from the goal line at the, I think it was at the run. The Baylor one. It was a huge run
after the fumble. I believe it was right. It was after the fumble. Steve Linton recovers the fumble. They're backed up to the one. You're thinking, dude. Immediately, you probably about to say the same thing. I'm thinking 2022. Pitch in the end zone. Richard Reese gets tackled in the end zone. And I'm thinking, here, like
5 yards deep.
5 yards deep. This is not going to be good. Richard Reese doesn't even have a chance. It might have been Colin Oliver that made it. I don't remember who it was that made the play for Oklahoma State. But to your point, go ahead. That was my immediate thoughts was this is not good.
Yeah. Very worried about it. But man, Dawson got so skinny through that hole. It was fantastic to watch. And honestly, I mean, we can debate it, but like if one of 2 things, if Ashton Hawkins is able to make that block, it might be a touchdown. And if Dawson Pendergrass jumps to the outside, it might be a touchdown.
It just slows down a little bit. Like to his credit, just slow down. Like you were running so fast, Dawson. You should have slowed down. But he just overran him a little bit. I'm with you. I was like, dude, he could have scored if he would have just set it up a little bit better.
Yeah, it was an awesome run. I mean, I think this is one of those things where this game was super special for him. Like that he was unquestionably the best player for Baylor on offense in this game. And Sawyer was really good as well. We'll talk about him here in a second, but Dawson was their best player. He was so good. He was exactly what they needed for this matchup. And that is honestly a credit to Keenan Hall. That's a credit to just this staff in general, where it's like they've been feeding Bryson Washington all these carries, but in a big moment, they needed someone else to step up. And Pendergrass did that. And honestly, I know it's not going to be talked about, but 6 for 52 for Richard Reese is also really good. I mean, he did some things. So I do want to give him some credit too. Obviously, a big storyline we talked about coming into the game was the quarterback rushing aspect of this game. Sawyer Robertson, 8 for 73 yards. So another quarterback goes for over 60 yards against Oklahoma State, including his 41-yard touchdown, which was awesome as well. Really well set up with the blocks. He just ran right up the middle and then showed off his athleticism. That's a little sneaky.
Yeah, it is. And that was actually the drive that was called. Dawson's touchdown was called back He had the 34-yard called back. They come back, give Bryson Washington one carry, then Sawyer scores on 41 yards out. So yeah, big game for Dawson, East Texas kid right there. Obviously just kind of does what he needs to do every single game, grinds away, sophomore out of Mineola. But let's talk about Sawyer a little bit too. 19 attempts, like that's polar opposite what we've seen for a while now. They ran the ball well against Tech, but he still threw it more against Tech. But 11-19, 222 yards, a lot of deep shots. 4 Baylor receivers caught a pass of at least 20 yards. 3 different receivers caught touchdowns. So he had 3 more touchdowns through the air. The interception was bad. Like that, that was almost like one of those, you wanted it to come because like he had been throwing the football so well. You don't want it to come by any means, but it was early in the game. He got it out of the way. And it's almost like he settled in a little bit. So he had the interception and then had the rushing touchdown. So that's another 4 touchdown game for him. So like if you're a college daily fantasy player, you're like, yeah, I'm sign up Sawyer Robertson because he's going to have 3 or 4 every single game, which is really cool. I think Baylor's, looking back over the history of it, they compared him to Robert Griffin in that particular terms of having 3 passing touchdowns plus a 40-yard touchdown rush in the same game.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the only 2 Baylor quarterbacks in history to do that, which is really cool. But yeah, another good game for him. And you just see his competitiveness every single time he's on the field.
Yeah, you do. And another game where he posts just this crazy QBR, 88.8 in this one. So once again, he continues to be very efficient. I think, coming into this game, I think it was very clear that Oklahoma State was really bad against the run and that they might pose a little bit more trouble in the pass game. I think they did that. I think they challenged Baylor a little bit in the pass game some. I think they had some of their ability to win on the outside was kind of evident compared to what Baylor saw against Tech. But in general, Baylor continued to hit explosives. And I mean, it's crazy. All these guys that had a catch in this game, only one guy, Ashton Hawkins, had more than 3 catches in this game. And he only had 4. Hal Presley had 2. No one else caught more than 1. I mean, it just was one of those things. But you talked about it. It's like, yeah, but they completed 1 for 38, 1 for 23, 1 for 13. It's these explosive plays that they were able to get. It's exciting, man, when you're able to run the ball like this and then you're able to hit explosive plays. I mean, that's what you want out of your offense. So yeah, I felt like Sawyer played really good. We continue to just talk about how he's so comfortable in this offense. He's got a full grasp of what they're trying to do. He manipulates the defense well, I feel like, and they're nervous about him running the football. I think they're becoming more nervous about it. And in general, like most of his throws, he's giving his receivers a chance. Not all of them, but most of them. He's giving them a shot. He's saying, hey, go make a play. And, we saw that in this game. Hal Presley, corner of the end zone. Perfect throw by Sawyer, but Hal made a play. Ashton Hawkins had probably the best catch of the season for Baylor, and it was a jump ball, well-thrown football. Give your guy a chance. Ashton went up, made a play. I feel like Sawyer's doing a really good job of that. He's putting the ball where, receivers, maybe it's a 50-50 ball, but I think they feel like it's more a 75-25 ball. And that's kind of what you want to see. And that's where they're winning right now when they do go on the outside. And then Sawyer's also, punishing teams across the middle of the field as well, as I think they're starting to establish more of those concepts as the season has progressed.
Yeah. Ashton Hawkins' catch was ridiculous, which from my seats, when I saw that play, I didn't think he caught it from the angle that I was sitting. I'm kind of up in a corner on the press box side, and I lost the ball, but he never, on the replay, he never lost control of that ball. I mean, it was a terrific catch. I mean, it was incredibly impressive. We've talked about how big his hands are, and they showed up there. Like he just went over the top, made the play, touchdown. That's something that Baylor's missed. Ketron Jackson being out, he's a guy that can do that. So you're kind of like, well, who's going to do it? Hal's kind of shown it, but it's just, can you do it in the game? And then to have both of them do that in those instances, go up over defensive backs and make one-on-one plays, massive. And Dave Aranda talked about that in the fall. This stuff is showing up in fall camp. And then early in the season, it wasn't showing up. Well, now it's showing up. I mean, you see it every single game right now, and that's massive. And there's not many quarterbacks that are going to throw 4 touchdown passes to wide open receivers that guys aren't making plays for him. And Sawyer's putting the ball in position, and they're going out and making plays for him. So really cool to see. Obviously, we got to give a shout out to the offensive line. I mean, holy cow. 700 yards, basically 700 yards rushing in two Big 12 games. I mean, like, just think about that for a second. Like, you think about the wide zone at the beginning of 22, obviously 21, but I don't think anybody, including myself, would have seen this 2-game stretch. If this might be the end of it for the rest of the season, they don't do anything like this again. But man, this has been huge testament to Jake Spavital, Mason Miller, and that offense. Obviously, saw your running back, everybody involved. This is nothing that anybody saw coming until these 2 games, because at any other point in the season, except against Air Force, they haven't done anything like this running the football.
Right. I mean, major softening of the schedule and the defenses that they're playing. I mean, it does matter. Like, the defenses they were playing were really good up front and really physical.
Including Colorado, that can't be overlooked. Now, you look at their stats across the board. They're leading in the Big 12 in sacks and tackles for loss right now. And nobody saw that coming. So go ahead. Didn't mean to cut you off.
No, definitely. I mean, it's a big thing that we're continuing to see. And I think you're seeing that when Baylor's facing a team that they hold an advantage against, they're not just winning, they're really kind of asserting dominance. And we've seen that the last 2 weeks. And that's been very impressive. If you go look at their grades, they're not going to jump off the page if you look at PFF grades. But I will say, this was the best game Sidney Fugars played at Baylor. He played really well. He put it all together this week, and he's starting to really run with that left tackle position. Really excited for him. It's been great to see his size, his strength. It's very evident, and he's setting the edge really well when they do run those off tackle type plays. That's been huge. I also want to give credit. These receivers are giving a lot of effort blocking, and Michael Trigg is giving a ton of effort as a blocker. He set up a few of those Dawson Pendergrass runs, which was really, that's great to see. A guy like that who's such a good receiving tight end, you automatically assume, he's going to be a liability blocking. And he really has not been this year. He's been really impressive to me. So definitely wanted to give him a shout out for that. And then I did want to mention one more thing on a pass catcher, because obviously as a guy that covers recruiting, I got to give shout outs to guys who catch touchdowns and make plays. And Matthew Klopfenstein, who hasn't played a ton this year, out there catching a touchdown on a really nice design of a play by Jake Spavital, kind of a fake QB draw type thing. Sawyer took one step forward and then threw it right over the top to Klopfenstein. So really excited for him. I think he's going to be a good player in the future. So nice to see him get in the end zone in a big game. Yeah.
Red zone touchdowns coming through. Isaiah Hankins hitting the field goal early was big, but red zone touchdowns have continued to be what's driving this stretch right now. These 2 wins, they're scoring in the red zone, and it's huge. And so we spent obviously a lot of time on the offense, and rightfully so. Another 500-yard performance. They're the number 3 against Power 5 competition, which I think at this juncture of the season that's the numbers you want to look at. They're number 3 in the Big 12 in scoring right now, at 31.5 points a game. I mean, they're scoring in different ways. They're getting good special teams play. Josh Cameron, another 20-yard plus return from punt returns, but they're just scoring the football. And that's the end of the game. You better be scoring the football. And it doesn't matter how you're doing it. You got to figure out if you're going to win games. And they're scoring it right now, 31.5 points. But then with all that, let's go to the defense, because I think there are warts on this defense, but I think in ways the scoring defense doesn't really match up with the other things that we see, right? Like, I think there's strengths to this. I think you get into the back half of the schedule, and Dave Aranda is saying, hey, we're not going to have another Iowa State game where they do whatever the heck they want. They're going to throw it, run it, whatever. We're going to have to take something away. That's exactly what they did in this game. They said, hey, you're not going to run the football. We're not going to allow you to run the football. Alan Bowman, he's going to I think you go in that game and expect if Alan Bowman throws the ball as many times as he did, that he's going to have an interception before the last drive of the game. That's his DNA, and they didn't get it, and it resulted in a lot of yards. But he throws for a lot of yards in general. He just turns it over way too much. Baylor, fortunately, was able to get out of this one without him turning the football over. But I think we had to start with the run game. Matt Jones, 12 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, sack. Steve Linton, another 2 tackles for loss. 3 sacks against Oklahoma State. They've only given up 7 on the entire season, regardless of opponent. So Baylor had 3 of those. And that's for that particular offense, that's a big deal. I was pleased with the defensive performance. you got to get rid of the blown tackles on the sideline. You got to get rid of the penalties, which Caden Jenkins' pass interference was atrocious. There's been a lot of bad pass interferences on defensive backs in college football this year that I've seen. I say it every year. That one was probably the worst that I've seen. So they got to clean up things, but I think you can feel pretty good about that defensive performance against Oklahoma State, considering what Baylor's game plan should have been and was.
I feel really good about, I think the easiest way to say this is I feel really good about some of the pieces on their defense after this game, but I also have concerns, and the concerns are really coming down to a couple things. But like, here's the deal. Lorando Johnson doesn't get hurt at the beginning of the game. He might be the one trying to make that tackle instead of Chateau Reed. And Chateau has had a lot of problems tackling in his career. He only played 5 snaps in this game, and one of them happened to be this one, a really costly one. And also, it's not just on him. Devin Bobby took a terrible angle on that play as well. They should have been able to corral him, because Chateau did stop him for a little
he needed
while.
help. He needed someone helping him. I mean, he was on his back, and that's the tough part about that play. Like, just hang on, dude. Like, ride the bull for a little bit, and he didn't. But nobody was there to help him. It was
right, and it was 3rd and 5. I mean, that was a big play. Like, he gets that tackle. It's now 4th and 7, 4th and 8,
or maybe.
And they were kind of in no man's land. I mean, that would have been a pretty long kick.
I bet they would have gone for it. I think they would have gone 4th down at that juncture of the game.
So. Right, and who knows what happens in that situation. But that was a really tough play. And again, Lorando doesn't get hurt. Maybe it's Lorando out there, trying to make that play. So that was one thing. So I am a little concerned their depth at cornerback is starting to get tested a little bit. LeVar Thornton had to play a lot. He got called for a pass interference that I also thought was relatively questionable. I didn't think that there was much contact there. I thought it was a pretty poorly thrown football, and then the receiver grabbed onto LeVar, and then they called a pass interference. I thought that was pretty bad too. But regardless, they got to be better. Like, all the things that we talk about in this passing, in this defense, I mean, at the end of the day, you did give up 359 yards to Alan Bowman, and it was pretty efficient throughout the entire game. It was a lot of Brendan Presley, but it was still efficient. And there were guys open, guys being schemed open, guys getting open. The safeties had some problems in this game. And the thing of it is, the reason why I'm concerned is because you go forward in their schedule, you're going to face a lot of teams, including the one next week, that will spread you out. And they will make you cover the slot. They'll make you cover outside. They'll make you cover in zone. So that's a little concerning. I do want to give a huge shout out, though, to a couple guys. Matt Jones, listen, we can look at PFF grades. We can look at how he did in coverage, which was not great, but he's being asked to cover Brendan Presley in the slot. That's a really tough ask, probably an unfair ask. But when they need a play, Matt Jones is making that play. The strip on Ollie Gordon, phenomenal. I completely turned the tide a little bit in that early portion of the game. The sack he had on Alan Bowman, awesome. The physicality he was showing after hitting Ollie Gordon, I mean, every time he hit Ollie Gordon, he was standing up and getting in his face and basically
they were in his head.
Know, like, they were in. And KT was great too. Keaton Thomas, he had a great game. His stats don't jump off the page, but he was really, really good. Well, those two guys were awesome. And then Steve Linton is just a wrecking ball as well. He is really, really good. And so you see all those guys standing out. They just need kind of everything to come together. And I do think some of this is picking and choosing your battles, and they chose to stop the run and force Alan Bowman to beat him. And he, for about, 3.5 quarters, he was keeping Oklahoma State in the game. He was making enough throws. And so that is a concern, something we're going to have to talk about going forward. But I did feel like Baylor's stars rose to the occasion.
Yeah. It's a give and take, because the expectations for the defense is you want them to be very good, but is that the reality? And so I think that's kind of the balance. When you watch these performances, it's you want to be able to take everything away, but if you're going to have to sacrifice something, it's what is going to get us beat if we don't take it. If you let Ollie Gordon go, and this is a decision that coaches have made every single week of this season against Oklahoma State. We're not going to let Ollie Gordon beat us. We're going to make Alan Bowman throw. And what Alan Bowman did through this point of the season was turn the football over a ton. Baylor was banking on that happening, and you feel pretty good about that. Like, I mean, it's baked into who he is, and knowing that he's thrown 23 interceptions over the last, less than 20 games of his career, you just feel good. And to give him credit too, like he didn't. There's a couple throws that Baylor could have made plays on. I mean, Corey Gordon had a couple where he's picked off similar ones to the ones that he missed in this game. So there's some of those plays that Baylor just didn't make the ultimate play to end drives, to flip the momentum. And that's where I was after that game. They win by 10, but you kind of feel like Baylor left some on the table because of their defense. Get some turnovers, make some plays. Obviously, the missed tackle on the sideline. It's just something they can build on. And I know they're playing TCU this Saturday, and that's going to be a test for them, but a little bit different. Oklahoma State's much more committed to running the football. They're more like Colorado than you're going to see. So I don't expect the same type of defensive plan against TCU as you did against Oklahoma State. And that's where I think you have confidence, is like Dave Aranda is going to shift what he's doing from game to game. He's not going to have another Iowa State game where they just tried to do everything well. He's going to do something to make at least one area tough if he feels like he has to do that. Against Oklahoma State, we've mentioned it. It was on the run. So I was overall pleased. And I just love the chippiness, man, of the defense. Like, even after the game, there's that video floating around of the entire team, including Matt Jones and Keaton Thomas, kind of going back. They're like holding all. Did you see this video?
Have you seen
it? So it's like from the corner. It's like up in the corner in the Oklahoma State section, and Ollie Gordon is just like, he's upset about something. And you don't know what. And he's like trying to get to the Baylor team as they're going to shake the hands of the students. And Ollie Gordon is just like trying to get around people to go to the Baylor team. And you see the entire Baylor team just like staring them down. And like, I don't know what was said before the game. There had to have been something said. We know Ollie Gordon likes to talk, but the entire defense did not back down. And last year, absolutely couldn't say that. And really until this point, like, you don't see this defense talking too much. Lorando will, but the entirety of the defense doesn't. I don't know if that's because they won last week and they said, hey, let's talk a little bit more this week. But it was good to see for me, because you want that specifically from your defense to get that swagger and get things going. To do it against Ollie Gordon is an interesting choice, but they did it. And they shut them down in the run game. So I was pleased to see that kind of that attitude with them this week.
Yeah, it definitely was a shift for sure. And I mean, they've had, like, Steve Linton will talk. We've seen that. Keaton Thomas will talk. Like, they have guys, but in this game, it was noticeable. I don't know if Ollie said something once he got on the field. It seemed like he did. It also seemed like the Baylor guys did as well. I don't know what was happening there, but they were definitely talking pretty much after every time that he was tackled, which was very often. But yeah, I mean, Baylor again, playing with some physicality, playing with some swagger. That's great to see. According to FP, FP Plus on ESPN, or SP Plus on ESPN, Baylor's moved all the way up to number 47 now in the country. So they're a top 50 team now. They have the number 43 offense, number 56 defense. I do think some of SP Plus is a little bit flawed, as is any metric, but I do think they're starting to see that, maybe those games that Baylor played early against those defenses, now you're starting to see it kind of shift back a little bit. And the team that they're going to play this week, TCU, they continue to move up as well. They're at 38 in the country. So nice little battle there. We'll see. We'll talk about all this week, but I do think it's notable that Baylor is now inside the top 50 teams in the country. That's a really good place to be, and that'll give you a great shot against the next teams that you're going to play going forward. But this was just a huge statement win in my eyes. This was a program building type win. And, Baylor's kind of in a rebuild right now after what happened last year. You're trying to turn things around, and you got to do that by winning home games, building, fan loyalty, building your brand, winning games against teams you need to beat for recruiting purposes. And they've done that the last 2 weeks. It's really important and really massive that they did. And now they have a big streak that they're going to need to try to end against TCU, as they're 1-9 in their last 10 against the Horned Frogs.
That's brutal. That's one of those, like, you haven't won at home since 2022. This is one of those that's rough. I mean, you want to beat TCU. The last time they did it was 2019. They in 21, you go to TCU. That's your Big 12 championship team. That's your Sugar Bowl championship team. You lose there on a heartbreaker. It seems like there's a lot of those against TCUs, those really close games. I mean, there's been a mixed bag of blowouts and stuff on different occasions, but there's a lot of really close games. I mean, 2018, with Matt Rule. I mean, it was a third string quarterback that beat Baylor. Matt Rule that year was brutal. I mean, there's just been a lot of those. Like, dang,
It was the
like, how'd that
Jalen Rager
happen?
game.
The Jalen
Yeah, it was the
Rager
Jalen
game.
Rager game. That's
Yeah,
what it
there's
was.
so many of those. And then throwing on top of that this year, Baylor had Gary Patterson's help in the offseason, throw another layer to that. But you mentioned that the close losses, I would say it was obviously off. Colorado wins again. BYU wins again. They both look top 25 teams. Obviously, Colorado's going to be in the top 25. I think they were in the most recent AP poll, top 25 that came out after the games. They're winning. Utah's fallen off a cliff. That's not looking too good anymore. But if you watch their games right now, they don't look like what they did against Baylor early in the season. Obviously with Cam Rising, but just in general, you can tell that that team just not in it the way they were beginning of the season. Tarleton is 7-1. Not that it means much, but that's really interesting nugget. And that first part of Baylor's schedule was tough. I mean, talk about the Tech game. Tech should have beat TCU just this past weekend. They have a chance to kick a field goal, fumble with like a minute and a half to go. And that was with their backup quarterback, as you mentioned.
True freshman.
Really true freshman. And I mean, he played well in that second half. They were up 30-17 on TCU. TCU has plenty of warts, and they were showing up there. They scored 14 points late. Tech's going to kick a field goal for third down. All they got to do is just basically run it into the line of scrimmage, kick a field goal, and you got a minute to hold TCU. Fumble the ball, give it away. So Baylor, the beginning of Baylor's schedule was obviously tough, and we knew that. And now they have to continue this momentum that they've built over the last two games.
Right, and they got a great chance to. And I just think it's hard to gauge where fans are at, but I would just hope that as we turn the page and now you're going into this game and Baylor's 4-4, TCU's 5-3. I think. Yeah, I mean, this is a big matchup. I mean, this is probably the difference between being in the top half of the Big 12 standings or being in the bottom half again. Truthfully, I think it probably is going to come down to that. If they win this game, I mean, if they get past this game and you look at their next three games, I don't think they'll be favored to win in Morgantown, but I do think they'll be favored in their other two games. Yeah, probably by a touchdown. Something like that, maybe. We'll see with Kansas. But I think just in general, this is another opportunity, right? Another opportunity to kind of squash what has happened over the last 2 years, to try to put those conversations to rest. And once again, we talk about building the brand, building fan loyalty. When you go out and you beat your rival, you're building that loyalty a lot. And I'm hoping that Baylor fans really, again, just kind of try to buy back in a little bit. I know some are completely out. I understand it's been a tough 2 years, but this is a great opportunity with a blackout game against TCU, another opportunity to recapture a little bit of the magic that Baylor's maybe been lacking over the last 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, really cool opportunity. 13-14 Big 12 champions are going to be honored in this game. Blackout, 7 p.m. kick. I was telling my wife earlier, I was like you get the 6:30s and 6 o'clock kicks, but the 7 o'clocks are kind of rare now. Like the ESPN slot, 7 o'clock is going to be a night game, like a legit night game, not start during the day, end at night. 7 o'clock, sun's set at that. Like nobody's going to be in the sun. No excuses to not be there and wearing black. Blackout, first official blackout since the 2016 season, which seems like, I mean, that's 8 seasons ago. It seems like much longer than that. And like the first self-promoted black uniforms, full setup. And it's here, and it's, if you love college football, you're a Baylor fan, like this is going to be the game to be at. Like you need to be there. You got to support this team. And, you want to push for a sellout and say all that stuff, but just be there if you can. Like it's going to be fun. Go there, let it be fun. This offense is fun. The defense is making plays. It's not what it's been for the last 2+ years. And they've really flipped the script. And not that it means they're going to win out, but there's an opportunity for this team to finish the season strong. And you want to see a good fan support this weekend against TCU. I mean, TCU game's always fun, even though they're 1-9 in their last 10, which is rough to think about. I hadn't even put that together, but it's always fun to play TCU. There's a lot of hatred in that rivalry, as we know. So any final thoughts on the Oklahoma State game before we move into previewing TCU the rest of this week?
Just a really nice win. Nice to see, it's really nice to leave a game at McLean Stadium and Baylor winning a home conference game. It'd been over 2 years and they did it. And Oklahoma State's a really good program. I don't care that they're having a down year. That's a good program. That was a really nice win by Baylor, a team against a team that was desperate, trying to get back on track and clearly hadn't given up. They played hard. They really did. Their injuries have clearly, I think, added up a little bit too much for them. And it's really hurting their overall talent. And Baylor took advantage of it, got a big win. And ultimately, that's all you can ask for. You got to find ways to get wins. That's all people talked about in the offseason. Wins are all that matter. Well, Baylor's 4-4. They got 4 of them already and got 4 more games to go in which they can try to build on that number.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, Baylor family, that's going to do it for this episode of Inside Baylor Sports. As always, thanks to each of you for listening. Make sure to tune in the rest of this week as we begin to preview TCU, the blackout game. We're going to have a lot of insight to that one. I know there's a lot of things I want to talk about for that particular matchup, but make sure you tune in the rest of this week. For Grayson Grunhafer, I'm Colt Barber. Have a great Monday and sick and bears.